الله أكبر الله أكبر. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله. حي على الفلاح.
After a decade of budget cutbacks, the United States Marines, heading for Kuwait, were short of equipment and personnel. They had a hard time putting a complete, fully equipped regimental combat team together on such short notice.
The Army gets all the new stuff. They get all the new tanks. They get all the new trucks. They get all the new stuff. And Marines get, leftover stuff. And they just teach you from, again, boot camp. You're a Marine. You do what you got to do. Do whatever it takes to get the mission done. That's how they got the nickname Devil Dogs. They do whatever it takes to accomplish your mission.
The equipment was sporadic. We were told, and this is one of the phrases that you always hear, oh, you'll get it when you're in country. You'll get it, whatever it might be, when you're in country. For instance, we were supposed to get savvy plates, bulletproof ceramic plates to go on our flak jackets. Well, you'll get those when you get in country. Never happened. The rest of your vehicles, oh, you'll get those when you're in country. Never happened. The rest of your machine guns in country. Never happened. NVGs in country. Never happened. So there was a lot of things that were on the TO that we never received. And we went in and, you listen to the junior Marines and they'd bitch and raise hell and go, hey, Sergeant Logan, this is jacked up. And yeah, you know it is. But you do the job and you save face and you try to buffer for the command and go, hey, listen, warrior, we're doing all we can on the big end. Be patient, we'll get it taken care of. And if it means we invade a country and we don't have that equipment, then that's what that means.
The 2nd Marine Regiment, 2nd Battalion, had already deployed with an MEU, leaving the regiment with only 2 infantry battalions, and 3rd Battalion's BDO Bastards were short nearly 100 Marines. They were soon filled with Marines from Camp Geiger, who were graduated several weeks early. There were several days of mayhem, working from before dawn to well after the sun went down, preparing to embark the entire regiment. Paperwork needed to be filled out. Beneficiaries were updated on insurance policies. Wills had to be completed and signed. Equipment needed to be inventoried, inspected, and packed. And Marines had to be loaded aboard their ships or airplanes.
What we were equipped with, there's your table of organization, your TO, which allots you X amount of gear. And if you've got a full TO, a Marine MP company, it brings as much firepower, if not more, than an infantry company can bring to the fight. There's a myriad of hardback Humvees and 50 caliber machine guns, Mark 19s, 240 Golfs, saws. An MP company is set up, a field MP company is set up just like an infantry company, except we carry and have equipped, and we are equipped with more heavy machine guns. That's what we're supposed to have. I don't know of a Marine unit that has ever been deployed with their TO, their allotment of everything that they're supposed to have. we were equipped with, I'd say 4 or 5 hardback Humvees, half a dozen or so soft-sided Humvees, 2 or 3 5-ton vehicles, things of that nature, and that's actually what we ended up shipping to Kuwait and invading Iraq with. As far as weapons go, we all had M16 rifles. There was a smattering. I think there was 13 saws in the company, which rated about 50 M249 saws.
There was one piece of equipment Logan wished he hadn't left behind.
We left because higher command would not allow us to take our M9 pistols for whatever reason. We left probably 90 M9 pistols in the armory because the higher headquarters didn't feel that it was pertinent that we take those, which, you know, you want to ask these people, hey, have you ever been in a gunfight? Well, obviously you haven't, because you know if you're in a gunfight, having another gun around is pretty handy. Otherwise, you've got a stick. You know, if you run out of ammunition with your M16, at that point you have a club, you know. And granted, I don't want to go into a gunfight with an M9 pistol, but if it comes down to an M9 pistol or swinging my M16 like a stick, I'm going with a pistol. But in all their infinite wisdom, they said that we could not take the M9 pistols, which still to this day makes me livid.
The Marines heading for the Gulf by air would arrive in country first and avoid the long sea cruise. But their fight was anything but first class.
Well, actually, before we got off, it was a totally miserable experience because we get on these planes with all of our gear, pack, gas mask, helmet, rifle, and you can't move on a standard commercial jet with that stuff. We got a Marine in every seat, so you can't move. So for the 12 hours, we're like sitting here like this. We've taken our rifles, we've thrown those on the floor. The stewardess, you know, walking on M16's like, oh, you can't have that in the aisle. The guy's like, yeah, all right. Well, then you could welcome to put that thing somewhere. So, you know, it's just a train wreck all the way there. So it was actually a relief to get off that plane, but then they crammed us on these little-ass buses, little red buses with curtains, you know, all of our gear.
It was just a whole lot of the unknown. You get to Kuwait, and there's been people there for some time, so you get on these buses, and they've got newspapers in the windows or curtains, and they're like, don't move the curtains. And so it's built to be this, and I think it probably was, but you have no idea the security piece or not. Your bus to Al Jabra was the first place I went to. It's in the middle of the night. You're dragging your sea bag around. You don't know what's around. All you see is desert everywhere.
As with any military operation, there's a lot of hurry up and wait for the young Marines.
So we pile all that up in the back. We're all jammed in there. And this was after we sat around the dirt for probably 4 or 5 hours in the dark, just waiting for, okay, now what?
You know, it was my first real exposure to being overseas and being in that situation. And it was all very new, but there was an air about it where you were like, and this is interesting. There's something going on. I am a part of something that is much larger than myself. So we got there to Kuwait City, landed, like I said, nearly almost dawn one morning. They put us on buses. No ammo, but we had weapons.
Yeah, of course we didn't have any rounds, so I think we managed to scrounge some up somehow. I don't know if they were brought with us inadvertently or we found some there, but, you know, our one platoon commander in the front, you know, loads about 5 rounds. So here we are sitting in our little red bus, curtains all around, can't see the middle of the desert, you know, 5 rounds to protect us in the middle of nowhere.
After their long wait, the Marines drove through Kuwait for hours, avoiding the populated areas. It was nearly nightfall when they arrived at an assembly area.
So we trotted off down the road, and they dumped us at, you know, another patch of dirt behind a berm, TAA, Coyote, I think that's Tactical Assembly Area, but it wasn't very tactical. It was just, you know, just a piece of ground and, you know, a tent city, if you will, without many inhabitants.
You're south of the Iraqi border, and you're waiting for some kind of word that says, hey, you're going in or you're not going in. So you try to find ways to fulfill your time and just make the days pass. You know, we would do a lot of PT. We did a lot of crew serve weapons training. Not that we got to fire much, but you're putting Marines on the weapons and you're talking about tactics and techniques and procedures and things that things that will save the lives of Marines. Because like I've said before, the mission is go accomplish the mission, bring your boys home. End of story. So you worked and trained towards those things, and you tried to keep the morale up. But they put us on buses and took us to Camp Coyote, TAA Coyote, Temporary Assembly Area Coyote, which I think they drove north towards Iraq and found a wide flat spot in the desert, which there are plenty of there in northern Kuwait, and said, we're going to put the Marines over here, and basically built up a berm and said, there you go, Marines, have fun. So we were there at TAA Coyote from mid to late January till March 19th, 2003.
They had different camps within Coyote, and they're all named after famous Marine battles. And then they moved us to a different camp, which was named after a famous Army battle, and I can't think of the name, but that's when we were joined up with the 7th 16th MP Battalion, and you know, that became our home for, let's say, another week before we jumped off into Iraq.
Living in the Kuwaiti desert, waiting to go to war, was a miserable experience.
We were building base camps as this massive influx of troops were coming in. There was never enough places to sleep. There were never enough tents up at a time. But nobody really thought anything about it because we expected to go in and we were told it was going to be austere. That's what war is, and you just go and pack what you're supposed to do and or supposed to have and go. For us, it was training. Once I was in the advanced party trying to get everything set up, and then once the rest of my unit came in, it was just time to really get to the nitty-gritty because we had no idea. I mean, we were listening to the news, but probably the States had more news than we had on a regular basis, and we're just trying to figure out when are we going, what are the things we have to do before we go, what order of march are we going in, with what unit, all those things. So that's what was really at the forefront of our mind.
I don't care, Marine, soldier, sailor, it doesn't matter. If you take somebody and put them in seclusion for 6 weeks and say, hey, you're going to do something, we don't know when, but you're going to do something, so just sit here and hang out. It becomes very monotonous and very boring, and the biggest thing to combat in combat is boredom. And we spent a lot of time, you know, and I'm sure the junior Marines thought, well, they're just screwing with us. Well, no, we were bored. We knew they were getting bored, and when Marines get bored, bad things happen. So we spent the time, you know, doing whatever we could do, play cards, whatever we could do to kind of pass the time and just wait. We were just sitting on the bubble waiting for it to pop.
On the morning of March 19, there was a flurry of activity around the camp. The entire regiment was packing up to move. Vehicles were being loaded and some of the tents broken down. Orders had come. On the 20th, they would move to an assembly area on the Kuwaiti border. On the morning of the 21st, they would attack into Iraq. For Edwards, there was another issue besides loading gear. How would her Marines react to being led in combat by a female officer?
I think sometimes when you're younger, you don't know what you don't know. So I'm that guy who just comes in and is like, hey, I'm here. What's up? You know, we didn't have a lot of interaction in Kuwait with the locals, and the few locals that we did have an interaction with on the bases, they're so used to the Air Force or whomever had been there, the Seabees and whatnot. I don't think it was a huge deal for them. I think it was probably a bigger deal for my Marines at the time. They didn't tell me this till later, but I think they were a little like, we're gonna get led by a woman. Like, I don't know about this. We're gonna see. And we're not gonna say no because A, we can't, but and B, we like her all right. But this is a new territory. This is new to us. For most of them, war was new to them. But then the whole concept of being led by a female was something they were gonna really have to peel back the onion on and see how they felt about it.
At 5:34 local time in Baghdad on March 20th, 2003, U.S. and United Kingdom forces began operations against Iraq. The initial strikes consisted of 40 cruise missiles and strikes led by 2 F-117s from the 8th Fighter Squadron, supported by Navy EA-6B prowlers and other aircraft. These attacks came shortly after the expiration of the 48-hour deadline President Bush had given Iraqi President Saddam Hussein to leave Iraq. This attack was aimed directly at Saddam and signaled a major change in U.S. policy in the conduct of war. The long-standing proscription against assassination of enemy political leaders was officially ended by this initial strike. Although the strike failed to kill Saddam, it was significant for more than the policy change. The fact that intelligence considered to be reliable had provided the targeting information also signaled a highly different way of waging war. Allied special forces had infiltrated Iraq long before the start of hostilities and had mapped the most important targets for targeting planners. These included leadership, command and control, and military targets. They continued to provide targeting information throughout the aerial campaign, including a second direct attempt at Saddam. These forces were highly active in northern Iraq, where they worked with Kurdish forces to defeat the Iraqi army. They also paved the way for the insertion via airdrop of the 173rd Airborne Brigade. During Desert Storm, roughly 10% of the munitions used were precision-guided munitions, or smart bombs. During Operation Iraqi Freedom, that number went up to 80%, and the bombs were even smarter. Air power led the ground attack in Operation Desert Storm in 1991, and was used more extensively in support of the ground war in Operation Iraqi Freedom. This was primarily because the 2003 ground war began on day one of overall operations, in hopes of catching the Iraqi military by surprise. The beginning of the war also caught some of the Marines at Camp Coyote off guard.
From Camp Coyote, we were sent to set up checkpoints heading into Breach Point West, which, you know, if I had a map in front of me, I could show you where it is, but as far as picking it out and saying, oh, it was at this grid corner or whatever, but we were set up, the Marines from, realistically, the platoon I was with, set up checkpoints heading into Breach Point West, going up, I guess it was the main road into Iraq from Kuwait City and out into the desert. And I want to say we started that mission around the 17th or 18th of March. And we set that up, and there was, at the end of the checkpoints, we had 5 checkpoints set up, basically on the corners, on the turns, where the Marines were supposed to turn to get to this assembly area so they could breach and invade Iraq. When we got out there, it was a vast expanse of nothing. And I spent several hours, better part of a day, traveling between the posts, checking on Marines, making sure that they were doing what they were supposed to be doing, which it was a pretty simple mission. Keep your eyes out. If somebody comes up and asks directions, push in this direction. Look for dumb stuff to happen. Stay awake. You know, it was a very simple mission. But by the time I got back to Breach Point West at Checkpoint 5, it left me in awe to look at the amount of rolling stock that the U.S. military had, and that was just a small portion of what was at the disposal of the U.S. military, not just the Marine Corps, but there was Marines and soldiers there as well. And you just sit there and go, where did all these vehicles come from? Where did all the tanks and the Humvees? And it was a sight to behold, really, just because of everything that was there. And so we were on that post, or on that mission, for about 16, 18 hours. We'd started dark 100, and we're sitting out in the middle of the desert, and at about 3 the next morning, and they come over the radio and said, hey, pull pin, come back to Coyote. So we pulled pin, we gathered everybody up, and we went back to Coyote. We broke down the comm systems and everything else. Next day, we get up 2 or 3 hours later, Said, hey, same mission, go do it again. So we rolled back out, set everything back up, and we were there again for about another 13 or 14 hours. And about 01 the next morning, pull pin come back. One of the Marines on the radio said, can you verify who's sending this order? Because we'd played that game in the middle of the night the day before. So they brought us back, and I want to say that was about 01 the morning of the 19th. On the day of the 19th, we were sitting there at Camp Coyote and cleaning weapons, knowing that the invasion was either about to start or had started. And I was sitting there with Staff Sergeant Ryan Loudermilk, who was our platoon commander at the time. And we heard something go overhead. We both thought it was an A-10 Warthog, just by the sound. And he looked at me and said, that's what I'm talking about. I said, you think that was a Warthog? And then he stopped and kind of looked at me funny. And about that time, a siren sounded. Well, it was a Scud. And we all broke out, hopped in these bunkers. And they had this most annoying voice I've ever heard that would get on there was a PA system there at Coyote, and they would get on there and go, bunker, bunker, bunker. It was this female's voice, and it was so irritating. It was just like, hey, just get a whaling siren or something. We don't need that. Whatever that is, we don't need that. So we went, hopped in the bunkers, and then you'd wait. And then 10 minutes later, they'd tell you, gas, gas, gas. You'd have to put on your gas mask and get all suited up and all that Mickey Mouse crap. And then 10 or 15, 20 minutes later, they'd say, all clear. So you'd go back to whatever it was you were doing.
The next day, what they would be doing was to breach Iraqi defenses and begin the charge to Baghdad.